Just ask you, we'll get started in a minute or two. Just ask you to place yourself on mute, including if you're calling us from a landline or cell phone. And I'm letting you know that we are recording the briefing and we will make it available as soon as possible after this concludes. And we will put a link up on the chat for you to access that. So we'll give it just another minute. Okay, let's get rolling. We have Commissioner LaTourette available to speak to you today about some important information about the situation of our water supply in New Jersey. And he will be assisted today by Steve Domber, who is a section chief with the New Jersey Geological and Water Survey. So, Commissioner?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for making the time to join us. We're hoping that you will join us in communicating very firmly to New Jersey residents and businesses the need that we have to conserve water as we make our way through the final weeks of this summer, which has been very hot, very dry. I needn't tell any of you that. You've been reporting on it. And so perhaps it comes as no surprise that we are, as of today, officially in drought watch. And that is that is the first step in a three-part system here in New Jersey that we administer from the Department of Environmental Protection, in particular our Division of Water Supply and Geoscience that is led by Director Trish Angelito, who is also with us this morning, or this afternoon rather. And so what I think is really important about this declaration is the opportunity that it creates, if well communicated and observed by our fellow residents and businesses, to avoid more drastic measures in the weeks and months ahead. A drought warning and then a drought emergency would be the next two steps in our three-tier system. But when we are in a drought watch, there are no mandatory supply side or user side restrictions that are imposed by the Department of Environmental Protection. It is intended to be a whole of government approach to communications in which the governor's office and state agencies and water systems will join us in communicating the message of conservation statewide. Water conservation, of course, is always important. But we see our greatest demand in the summer months from the use of outdoor water in dry and hot periods like this, the excessive watering of lawns. My front yard is brown, and it's okay. And I want us to be able to communicate that statewide, that the brown just means dormant. It doesn't mean dead. Let's conserve the water because we really do need it. I'd be remiss not to point out that this is indeed part of the double-edged sword or two-sided coin. Pick your favorite metaphor of the impacts of climate change here in New Jersey, right? We can in fact see devastating amounts of rainfall that wash away huge swaths of our communities, as they did last September, and many times since, quite frankly, including in Bergen County last month in an unnamed storm. On the one hand, we can have that, and on the other hand, we can have dry conditions and conditions that tax and stress our water systems, like the occurrence of harmful algal blooms like the 9 Mile one that is sitting on the Millstone River and creating threats with respect to the intakes that are located on the Raritan, and requires the dutiful attention of both the DEP and water systems, who are certainly collaborating with us. But this is our present and it is our future, right? The periods of drought between periods of intense rainfall that causes significant flooding threats. What we're seeing as a function of water supply now is drying, a diminished availability of groundwater, a steep decline in reservoir capacity, and operational issues like the one that I mentioned that are challenging to manage for, like that 9 Mile HAB. What we intend and hope is that the propagation of the drought watch will encourage the type of conservationist behavior that is necessary to preserve water supplies. But when we look out at temperature outlook, at precipitation outlook, we continue to be concerned. And so that is the reason these collection of disparate issues that are leading us to the point of declaring the drought watch, the dry indicators, the extended period of low precipitation, the extreme heat, the high demands, the system specific operational issues, right? And the short-term and monthly forecasts that we've been tracking. It's not simply a function of just one of these factors, but a combination of all of them. And so what DEP will be providing to all of our partners in the water sector, all of our partners in the legislature and in local governments, is a toolkit that will help to provide that consistent public messaging about water conservation, including add all of that information on our website and being circulated to all of our partners. And so that is the message, broadly speaking. I'll just pause for a moment before questions and ask Director Ingelito or Chief Dahmer if they have any points that they would like to contribute.
And go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, Commissioner, you said it very well. It's been a hot and dry year, and that's led to increased demands and lower the normal conditions. And we felt it was appropriate to take this first step. And actions we take now will hopefully alleviate the need for further ones, but we'll continue to monitor the situation closely and adapt as needed.
Trish, anything to add? Okay, we'll take questions. I just ask that you raise your hand and I will acknowledge you, and in the order in which your hand goes up. Scott.
Hey folks, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So if you look at some of David Robinson's reports out of Rutgers, we've had some very, very warm Septembers and Octobers in recent years. And outside of extreme weather events like Ida last year, it's been pretty dry as well. Is that concerning to you as we move into, we end summer and move into fall?
Yes, it's concerning. That's why we're at the stage we are right now in declaring the watch in hopes of having an effect on the demand. One of the things that is of concern to us is the projections for the precipitation we're not looking at them as being enough to make up for the steep declines that we've seen. And so a continued dryness is of concern and could could push us into those other categories. We don't want to see that happen, and we don't want at the same time to prejudge it. And so that's why we're at this stage right now. And certainly the team here consults with the state climatologist and did so in the lead up to the discussions that we've all had here in arriving at this point of public information.
Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that covered it.
Okay, great. John Hurdle?
Yeah, hi, Sean. How close are we to a drought warning or a drought emergency? I mean, you may have started to answer that question just now, but in terms of stream flow or reservoir levels, how close are we now?
I think that I think it's too soon to tell, but we're close enough that here we are in August, right? We're about to go back to school in a month, and maybe some of that water usage goes down, but nonetheless, we believe it's appropriate to put us into watch, even at this later point in the year. So I think that's significant. But I don't want to prejudge the conditions. What if we do get multiple soaking rainfalls, right? All of these things can happen on sort of I think the circumstances that we have studied that appear in the climate science report that we released 2 years ago, and that certainly we've been discussing, publicly, including with you all since Ida last September, is that these wild swings can be there. We at once project them, but they are also unpredictable. And so I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves by saying that, don't worry, we'll never reach warning or emergency, because I don't know that. And it is my being and certainly in the ethos of this department to be very direct with the public. So conserve water.
Okay, thank you.
Danny Freeman?
Afternoon, everyone. Just a quick question. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes?
You're good.
Is there a question, any concern about a heightened fire risk with this potential increase in drought warnings?
We've been in a stage of heightened fire risk for the better part of this year. That does continue. We, as folks may recall, had the largest wildfire in many, many years, just not even 2 months ago. Our wildfire risk continues to be a significant one, and one that we'll speak to when we are before the Senate panel that Senator Smith is holding this Thursday on climate resilience. But yes, that does remain a risk.
David Mathau?
Commissioner, if somebody sees somebody wasting water, or they're aware of some gross, situation where the water's being, wasted in a significant way, what should people do? Not to say that people should turn in their neighbors, but obviously this is a serious situation, and you're asking people to conserve water. Should they call the police? Should they call the DEP? What should happen?
I think we should support one another. And I think that we should remind our neighbors of the circumstances that we are in, that we all experience together, right? There is only one water, and it's all connected, and we all share it. And so that we are not at a point of mandatory restrictions, either on the supply side with our water systems or on the user side. And I don't want to sow that impression, nor do I wish for our folks who are so deeply invested in analyzing the data to be distracted by calls to the DEP hotline about water waste. I think of this the same way that well, not the same way, similar way that I do the issue of idling cars, which is illegal. And one of the best ways that we are able to address that risk to air pollution is by over communicating it, and very importantly, telling our kids, because you know who they are good cops. And if you had 11-year-olds like I do, they would be all too eager to point out when you are wasting the water or idling your car and contributing to air pollution, right? So all the places that we communicate this imperative really, really do matter. And I'll be reminding my neighbors, and I hope that you all will too. But you don't need to call the police.
Commissioner, if I could also add that while we're talking about a statewide drought watch today at this meeting, which is voluntary, there may be local municipalities or water utilities which have additional restrictions in place. So there may be local variations, local conditions which dictate a different set of actions.
Very important point. Thank you, Steve.
I'm going to circle back to the top of the order. Scott, do you have another question?
I think you skipped Rye.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. I didn't see your hand go up. Go ahead, Ray.
Thank you. That was a last minute hand raise. Two things. Touching on what you just said about local variation. If there were a warning or an emergency, would it be likelier to be in a certain part of the state or not? Is there one part of the state that's tighter supplies than another? Maybe go over that a little bit. And then second, in terms of interstate relationship, are there any use issues upstream with New York and the Delaware where they're using or as much as they can, but more than they should? And similarly, should any of the downstream neighbors like Pennsylvania be concerned about New Jersey's use? Thank you.
I'll tackle the regional issues. And Steve, if you have or Trish, if either of you have some information relative to local variation and enforcement of that, by all means. So I've been in contact with the Commissioner of New York DEC, the Commissioner of New York City DEP relative to shared water issues. What we're looking at here is less a function of the Delaware Basin. What we're talking about when you ask your question about water use and how New York may be using their water versus our use of that same water, a lot of it's not that doesn't play a role. Of course it does. Again, just one water. But what we're looking at very specifically are the direct sources that we have that are integrated into our indicator system here in the state, right? So we're looking at the reservoirs that are within our state. We're looking at the groundwater capacity and its recharge. We're looking at stream flow. It's not to say, I don't say that to suggest that the release of water from the Catskill reservoirs into are not a point of consideration. They are. And Steve, certainly feel free to add any concerns that you may have there. But at this point, I'm not reaching out to New York and asking that they do something differently. Steve or Trish?
I was going to say, as far as the ability to look at drought warning or emergency for subregions within the state, we can certainly do that. That would depend upon the actual conditions in place. So it might be possible in the future, potentially, or hypothetically, to have the northern part of the state in a drought watch and the southern part in a drought warning. But it's really going to depend upon how the conditions improve or decline regionally or subregionally within the state.
Yeah, and if you were to look back at our last really difficult experience with drought, you'd look to the early 2000s, you'd see that there were different regions under different under different degrees of watch or emergency, 2002, 2003.
Okay, thank you. John Hurdle? John, do you have another
No,
question?
no, I don't have another question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Danny Freeman, do you have another question? Okay. David Mathau, do you have another question?
I do not. I don't know why my hand is still up. Sorry.
All right, that's okay. You're forgiven. Michael Warren,
I have a question.
who is that?
It's Alex from News 12.
Okay. Go ahead, Alex.
Commissioner, I just wanted to see what you could tell us about the situation in Newark in regards to the water main break. If you have a timeline on repairs and what it means for the residents in the surrounding area.
We're tracking it closely, as is the Office of Emergency Management. Our division of water supply, as I think folks know from past experiences in Newark and elsewhere, gets very engaged with the systems to analyze root cause issues, to look at what the capacities are, the health of interconnections with other systems, whether there is backup water staged if that's necessary, and a myriad of other things. Trish, if you have the latest, by all means, share it. I thought we were looking at a day turn, potentially as much as a day to ultimate correction, but please feel free to get into the details.
Sure, thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, so the Newark Water Department is still currently isolating that break, and that process can take quite some time because as you isolate the break, you don't want to be causing pressure issues in other areas. And then once the break is isolated, they can, you'll start to see pressure restore throughout the system and have a better idea of a definitive time frame. As the commissioner said, early reports were, like a day or so to fully address the issue. And as the commissioner said, the Division of Water Supply and Geoscience works directly with the water systems that are impacted by and all the interconnected systems to determine what needs they may have or what advisories are needed in all of those areas based on any loss of pressure to those systems, as well as any provisions of alternate water supply that might be needed. And then, as the commissioner said, our Office of Emergency Management has been working really closely with both the county OEM and the local OEM to identify all the sensitive populations that are impacted and ensuring that they have all the water supply needs, both from potable standpoint, but also from any fire suppression needs. So that's, an active, the situation's evolving and we're getting updates on a very regular basis throughout this process and have been in communication with our local partners, since this morning.
Alex, do you have any follow-up questions on that?
Only in the sense of just in general, what, Commissioner, can you say this indicates about the general state of infrastructure in New Jersey?
Does anyone need to hear me say again that we have a $30 billion need for infrastructure, water infrastructure in the state of New Jersey? But if you did need to hear me say that again, it remains true. We're continuing our work thanks to the leadership of Pat Gardner, who's not with us today. Trish and Steve are on her team. Pat Gardner is our Assistant Commissioner for Water Resources Management. We're developing a water infrastructure. We continue to add on to our water infrastructure investment plan, most recently with the determination of what the intended use plan, the list of projects for this coming year would be. But I think that it paints a familiar story, right? We tend to take water for granted. We tend to take for granted the fact that it will get to us and get away from us in all the ways we need it. But that doesn't occur without continued investment and asset management and an operations and maintenance program that is always going to meet the needs of its residents. Even when all those things are still present, these issues can occur, right? This is often what I would say the age of America's bones, they're failing.
Thank you. Michael Warren.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I had two questions. One on the Newark situation, specifically with regard to boil water advisories in the city, as well as Bloomfield and Belleville, how long we expect those to be in place. And the other with regard to the drought watch, Commissioner, you had mentioned that some drinking water reservoirs are seeing a steep decline. Could you give examples of which reservoirs we're most concerned about, and how that compares to the groundwater situation in South Jersey?
Trish, want to take the first part of that with respect to public health notifications that are going out or in place?
Sure. And so you're correct. There are boil water advisories in place for Belleville, Bloomfield, and Newark's Pequannock. So the portion of Newark's distribution system that serves, so it's not the entire service area. The Wanacue service area was not impacted by this break at this time. And so the way that those will happen is once the break is fully isolated and pressure has been fully restored across all systems, there's a sampling process that has to happen where the systems collect samples to ensure that the water quality is restored. And once those samples are analyzed, then those advisories would be able to be lifted. And so there's a time frame in which after the isolation happens, pressure is restored. You would then collect samples to ensure water quality is maintained, and then the department would evaluate that data before a lift of those advisories would be able to be done.
Okay, and then with respect to the question on water supply indicators, where we've seen declines that are troubling, to my mind, the New Jersey district water supply reservoirs, the Veolia reservoirs, the former Suez reservoirs, where we've seen steep decline now. The Bergen arid reservoirs, they did bounce back up a bit with that hard, intense rain that we saw that caused them flooding also. So those are two areas. Steve, feel free to add your thoughts either on those or others, and issues with stream flow and groundwater as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's those systems that are providing sort of the suburban neighbor communities where there's a lot of outdoor water use that are declining steeply. So North Jersey District, Veolia and Bergen County, and I would also add the central New Jersey reservoirs, the New Jersey Water Supply Authority reservoirs, coupled with the HAB situation that's going on in the Millstone too. So we're seeing steep declines there as well. Again, they're still above sort of drought levels, but rates of decline which we're watching closely and sort of helped us decide to issue a drought watch statewide. As far as South Jersey stream flow and groundwater levels go, that has certainly been the drier part of the state for most of the year. They've gotten some storms, but not enough. Groundwater tends to respond a little bit slower. It takes a while for the water to infiltrate and the groundwater levels to recover. So we're watching those closely, and they are definitely below normal. And I would add that a week of rain or a week of no rain doesn't get you into a drought, and a week of rain doesn't end the drought, right? So it takes a duration of time, weeks to months to get into a drought, and also weeks to get out of a drought, depending upon the amount of precipitation. So one day of rain does not necessarily change the situation. It certainly helps, but it doesn't resolve.
Think about it as the difference between weather and climate.
John Hurdle, do you have another question?
No, thank you. I'm fine.
Okay. I see, Scott, that your hand is still up. Do you have another question?
Yeah, Steve, at what capacity or percentage of capacity is a reservoir in a drought emergency? Is there a baseline for that? What did we see in 2002 when we had it last time?
So there's no definitive trigger. It's not like when it drops below a certain volume at a certain time of year, do you take an action? And every reservoir system is different. They respond differently based upon the volume of the watershed area, the amount of rainfall they get, the size of the reservoir. So there's no specific trigger, but we're talking levels that are, significantly, measurably different than where we are now. If you go to njdrought.org, Part of that information contained in there is the reservoir storage levels, and you can see where the current storage is compared to sort of long-term averages. So it's impossible to say exactly, but certainly below where we are today.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. If there are no other questions, I will thank the commissioner. I thank Steve and Trish for joining us, and I thank you for your participation, and we look forward to your help in spreading the word about conservation. Commissioner, do you have any closing words?
No, I'll only say thank you. And just be mindful of the flip side. We're expecting a hurricane season that is more active than those years past. Some folks have put it on the same playing field with the year of Superstorm Sandy, which we will mark the 10th anniversary of this October. So again, this is the double-edged sword of our experience of a changing climate in New Jersey. And we appreciate you sowing awareness of that fact and helping folks to understand all the ways that they can help themselves and one another. So thank you.
With that, just I'll point out that if you have any questions, need any follow-up questions answered, or need to be pointed to any resources, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Karen Shinsky in the press office. And as I mentioned before, we will be posting the video recording of this very shortly, and you shall have access to that very soon. But if you have any problems with that, just let me know. Again, thank you for your participation, and have a great day.